Hi there, this is Erica Merrill, and I am the founder of Perfect Legal Video. I am very excited because today we are going to be covering some very hot topics that are in the news with attorney Brian Jones. And thank you so much for joining us today, Brian. Welcome.
Thank you, Erica. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. It's freezing, but besides that, I'm doing really well. How about yourself?
Yes. I'm promising that this is winter's last gasp.
All right, well, I'm going to hold you to that.
Oh no.
I know. Well, let's talk about a cold topic. We have got some news that has come out on the very long, drawn out trial here of Harvey Weinstein. And when I say that, I of course don't mean the trial that happened in the courts, but he's been on public trial for a couple of years now. The court trial, I believe, only lasted about 6 weeks. Would you agree?
Yes, yeah, it was relatively short trial as far as that's concerned, but has been in the media for years.
Heck, they even had time to make a movie about it.
Right? Yeah.
It's ironic because of who he is and what he does, and the people in the movie are being nominated for awards and everything else. So it should be interesting. I think John Lithgow plays him and does a pretty good job.
Huh. Well, I'll have to catch that one.
You definitely will. Bombshell is what I'm referring to. But yeah, so let's talk about it. I know that originally when this case came out, I mean, it seems like this always happens. Somebody will bring something up, someone will accuse, and then if it's somebody rich and famous like this, now all of a sudden there were 80 cases. And 40, I know that they did some research on it out in LA, and the 40 of the cases were just out of the time frame for when you can file. And can you tell us a little bit about the time frame of when people can file these sorts of things?
Yeah, so most crimes have a statute of limitations in Ohio of 1 or 6 years. So all misdemeanors are 1 year, all felonies are 6 years. There are exceptions for murder and sexual assaults, rape in particular. And in Ohio, that statute of limitations is 25 years currently. There is legislation pending in the General Assembly right now to eliminate that statute of limitations and make it a forever statute of limitations. Presumably an accuser would have to be alive to actually make the accusation and testify in court. But that is a hot topic in Ohio right now. The legislature are thinking about eliminating that. And it's a hot topic all across the nation as the Weinstein case brings to light these allegations that are 10, 15, well, I guess I should say 30, 40, 50 years old. And what are the due process problems with that, which really are rooted in evidentiary problems. The inability to find witnesses, the inability to build an alibi, and really the inability to remember the details of a particular interaction with a particular individual.
Yeah, I mean, with that kind of time, it definitely can seem like certain lines can be blurred. And I think before we go any further, when we talk about the different charges that are coming up here, I'd love for you to explain the different levels of rape charges, because I know that he was definitely not found guilty of holding someone up by, with a weapon like a knife or a gun. He didn't do that. I think it was like a third level. But you're the expert, so why don't you let us know what the different levels are and what we're looking at here with this case?
Sure. So Harvey Weinstein was acquitted of predatory sexual assault, which in New York is committing the crime of rape in the first degree, while also engaging in some other conduct, either causing serious physical injury or threatening the use of a dangerous instrument, presumably a weapon, a knife, firearm, something of that nature. So the jury also acquitted him of rape in the first degree. So as soon as they made that decision, the predatory sexual assault would have gone away. He was found guilty of a criminal sexual act in the first degree and rape in the third degree. And those two charges are similar but different. So the criminal sexual act is probably engaging in oral sex. So forcing a person to have oral sex or incapacitating a person. So a person that's too intoxicated or a person that for some other reason can't say no. From everything that's been covered, and I certainly haven't read the transcripts of this trial, so my commentary is largely based on the media reports of it. This is a compulsion to engage in oral sex. That's the criminal sexual act in the first degree. Rape in the third degree is very similar, engaging in sexual intercourse with a person that's unable to consent. So this one is probably more related to somebody who's too intoxicated to consent or is on drugs and unable to consent for that reason. These crimes are similar to Ohio statutes being sexual battery. In that case, a person who is too intoxicated to consent to sexual activity is unable to consent under Ohio law, and the person who forces sexual activity on them would be guilty of sexual battery, which is a felony of the third degree in Ohio. In New York, Harvey is facing significantly longer prison terms on the high end because of the way New York sentencing differs from Ohio sentencing. They have what's called indeterminate sentencing, so you get a range. You may be sentenced to 10 years, but the penal system has the ability to grant you good time and credits and things like that, so you can reduce that sentence significantly in New York. Ohio has what's called definite sentencing. So if a judge gives you 10 years, you're doing 10 years. There are good time credits, but those are very, very small. You can gain, I believe, a day or two per month of your incarceration.
Wow. I mean, and that is really interesting. And I believe like one of the cases was where the woman followed him into the bathroom and then he blocked the door and forced her to have oral sex. But I hadn't heard much about the second one where it was forcible rape and maybe she was under some kind of a chemical influence. But I mean, gosh, those two crimes happened they're separate and they happened over 2 days in 2013. So it was quite a little spree he had there that weekend for the criminal accusations that came out of this.
Yeah.
So what's interesting and what you were talking about is the sentencing, and I believe it was 25 years is what they're talking about, but it sounds like from what you're saying that could be significantly reduced in New York City.
It could. I believe the range of his exposure is 4 years up to that 25 years. And like I said, with New York having indeterminate sentencing, the judge could say 25 years, but he can get parole and release early from that. So he very well may spend the rest of his life in prison, but it's not a foregone conclusion.
Okay. And he's 67 and not doing that great. From what the reports are. But yeah, and with those two different crimes are going to be sentenced, does he have to go back to back or can he serve those concurrently?
Under Ohio law, and I couldn't tell you for New York law, but most states are similar on this issue of consecutive versus concurrent sentencing. So consecutive sentencing means the sentences are served end to end. So the first sentence is completed, and then the second sentence starts. Concurrent sentencing is when the sentences overlap with each other.
And so that's what you think would possibly happen in New York, or I'm not sure what they have for sentencing over there.
not knowing the individual judge, I can only comment on what would be likely here in Ohio.
Yeah.
The judges that I appear in front of with two separate accusers, I guess victims now that they've found Mr. Weinstein guilty, two separate victims, two separate dates, two separate acts, those would likely end up being consecutive sentences.
Oh, wow. That's a long time. And so do you think, I know that out in LA, they had up to 80 people come forward, and I guess they investigated at least 40 of them, and most of them, like we said, were, too long ago to count for now. But they have two that are definitely coming up, and they haven't talked about it yet, whether the sentencing that's happening here in New York might cancel out any court dates in LA, because how many years can one person who's 67 really serve? I mean, is that normal?
It's possible. There are definitely cases where prosecutors decide, an individual has received a life sentence or has received what is, for all intents and purposes, a life sentence for that individual. And the prosecutors won't go forward because of that. They're going to be incarcerated until they die anyways. However, with a case like Harvey Weinstein's, the message of getting that conviction for those prosecutors is more important than the practical outcome of keeping him incarcerated.
Right. And that is going to be, I guess, what helps make a lot of the victims feel better is that, he's getting some sort of a punishment, and it likely will be for many of his remaining years.
Absolutely. For those accusers, it's often about validation.
So one of the things that you brought up when we were speaking about this earlier was that we were hearing a lot of discussion about how the verdicts are landmark because the case involves an accusation of rape between individuals in an ongoing relationship. And there was also consensual sex. I mean, is that a unique fact pattern in Ohio?
It's absolutely not. In fact, we handled a case just over 2 years ago with a similar fact pattern. In our case, it was a husband and wife. The marriage was coming to an end, but the interesting fact about that case was that they had separated and gotten back together multiple times. And on this particular occasion, our client's accuser had moved in with her parents, and her parents were very much against her going back to our client. And so when she did go back to our client and engage in what we would call consensual sexual intercourse, she got caught, and we believe she made up a story claiming sexual assault. That sort of situation, it absolutely occurs. We had another case involving two students at a local university, and one of the students had a girlfriend, and when the accuser made a pass at him and he rejected her, she then made an accusation of sexual assault because he was very clear about the fact that he was going to tell his girlfriend that she had done this, and the two of them were friends at the time. So she had betrayed her friendship. These sorts of allegations between people who know each other, who have prior relationships, who have prior friendships, I would venture a guess, are going to become more and more frequent in the coming years because of the Me Too movement, because of this cultural shift from innocent unless proven guilty to believe the accuser, and starting by belief. I think will result in a wide array of situations like we talked about last week, Erica, where individuals make a statement, they make an allegation that they're making offhanded in order to save face or put another individual in a negative light among their friends. And then that statement gets reported to authorities, and the authorities take over and run with it. And now the accuser is stuck in the position of either admitting the false statement from the beginning or sticking to their story and writing it out. And that sort of lie, that sort of deception is a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, when people get falsely accused because somebody is embarrassed or they did the wrong thing and they're afraid of getting caught later, we've talked several times about all the different ways that someone's life is ruined from being wrongly accused. And we will be talking about this in a real example coming up in an interview about a 19-year-old boy that's trying to get off of the sex offender list. But it really does ruin their lives and where they live, and even what jobs they can get, their family and their personal relationships. So it's very serious, and I don't think that the accusers realize that at the time, if they are wrongly accusing just to kind of save face for something that they in fact did.
Correct. And that's the second biggest tragedy in all of the impropriety that has come out over the last 4 years, is that there are people who have legitimately been assaulted, and that is absolutely wrong and terrible. But the individuals who have been falsely accused, pilloried, excoriated in the media, removed from their social circles, excluded from families, those people suffer as much as the victims of sexual assault.
Absolutely. And it's a huge injustice. I mean, and with all of this change, do you think that you're going to see a lot more charges of acquaintance rape in the future in Ohio?
Well, we already see them, Erica. They come in all the time, from Tinder dates that end up in a situation where they regret the actions in the morning after, to kids in high school who engage in some sexual intercourse on a dare, or because other friends are also engaging in sexual intercourse and they want to become part of the hip crowd. On a variety of bases, we are seeing more and more sexual related charges, and the consequences for those charges are just so far reaching for the accused.
One of the interesting parts of the Weinstein trial was that several women testified who were not the alleged victims of charged crimes. Why was the prosecutor allowed to introduce testimony of crimes that were not charged?
So that goes back, there's two reasons. First is the New York law that Mr. Weinstein was charged under, that predatory sexual conduct, or I'm sorry, that predatory sexual assault charge. It's part of the charge that the prosecution has to prove. Second, and more applicable to Ohio law and most other states, is what's called 404B evidence. And 404B is an evidentiary rule that's used in courts, both in federal and state courts, that allow either party, either the prosecution or the defense, to introduce evidence of what's called other bad acts. So typically in a trial, the trial is supposed to be about the bad act, the allegation that is the source of the charges. But there are certain instances when other bad conduct can come in during the examination of a witness. And I've always used the mnemonic device Miami Cops to remember what categories are eligible for prior bad acts. So it's motive, intent, absence of mistake, identity, knowledge, opportunity, preparation, or prior plan. So MIAMIKOPP.
That's very clever.
Thank you. So whenever the prosecution is seeking to introduce, just bad stuff about my client, which is the default rule, is that should not come in, because the jury shouldn't be tainted by something that you did bad in the past. People have heard the phrase, once a thief, always a thief. Well, in the American criminal justice system, that is not the standard. The standard is, did you commit this theft offense today? And whether you did it in the past is irrelevant. But under certain exceptions, the law allows that information to come in.
Wow, that's very interesting. And thank you for clearing that up for us. There is another interesting piece that I wanted to cover, and that was that Harvey had a lot of these women sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, and it's even said that there was no record of it, except he just kind of did it on a photocopier, and it looked like it was just like fill in your name kind of a situation, and he kept those for himself. Now, it has been said that you really can't have an NDA to cover up a criminal charge. Is that what you found to be true?
So generally speaking, that's correct. A non-disclosure agreement wouldn't be, it wouldn't cover somebody coming in and testifying in a criminal matter. However, those non-disclosure agreements can be enforced financially in some circumstances, even though a witness would testify in a criminal case. The particularities of the NDA would determine that, and the applicable law of the location that the witness is testifying. A lot of what Harvey Weinstein did was creepy. It was abusive from a power perspective. It was wrong what he did, to use his position of power to gain sexual favors. But a person in that position who wants to share their life with the people that they're mentoring doesn't want to get stabbed in the back on the back end. And as widely known as Harvey Weinstein is, and was, and has been for decades, there are a lot of enemies for people that are that high up in society, and a lot of people who would relish the opportunity to find his dirty laundry and air it to the public. And those non-disclosure agreements are designed to prevent that from being aired. Now, obviously, the sort of sexual harassment that he engaged in, and the sort of power moves that he used in order to gain sexual favors is inappropriate, and he should not have done that. But he should also be able to protect himself from people who are trying to find out secrets about him picking his nose, or keeping a dirty apartment,
or eating dozens of donuts and throwing them at people, and ordering everything on the menu, and all of the different rumors that were out there.
Right.
Well, that makes sense. And we really appreciate your helping us with this new information coming out. I'm sure that we'll talk about this again as more things are revealed in the news, and the sentencing happens, and finding out whether or not they are going to go forward with the 2 cases in LA. So is there anything else you'd like to say about this current event that everyone is riveted by?
Well, what I'd like to say is this, Erica, is that a trial has occurred and a verdict has been reached. And those individuals who got on the stand and gave their testimony, they withstood strong cross-examination, and the jury ultimately believed them. That is the process that should be pursued in every single one of these cases. Harvey Weinstein had an excellent legal team who pulled all of the evidence and presented it. And at the end of the day, the jury believed those individuals beyond a reasonable doubt, and the verdict was reached. Now, not on all of the charges, but on some of them. What we feel is important, what I personally feel is important, is that proper investigation is conducted, that independent investigation is conducted, and that evidence is presented in court so that the jury can make their own decision. And that's what happened in this case. Now, one of my issues with this case has to do with that 404B evidence. I think that it's too widely admitted, and I think that it leads to verdicts that are based on not the allegations that are before the jury. The most recent example that is widely known is Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby tried a case to a hung jury when 404B evidence wasn't admitted. But when that evidence was admitted, he was convicted, and he was convicted, I believe, across the board. So you can see in that case how influential that kind of evidence can be.
Well, I really appreciate your information today, and such a clear and concise explanation of the law in this case. And we'll see what happens in the future for Harvey. It doesn't sound like he's going to be attending too many LA parties in the near future.
Doesn't sound like it, Erica.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and we will look forward to talking to you soon.
Excellent. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.